Hello, welcome to episode 4 of this series where I'm going to show you how to carry out a very important refactoring on our application, lifting state up and making our components more reusable. So by the end of this episode, you will understand what lifting state means, lifting state up in the hierarchy of your components. You will learn how to move logic up to a shared parent component, which of course will make your application architecture and your let's say components more reusable. You will understand how you can refactor the application by splitting the form that you have into reusable components, like for example the add book form component. And you will see how you can pass callback functions as props to your child components. So you're going to basically create a function inside of your parent component, and then you're going to pass that function as prop to the child component. And in our application, the good news is that there is a very practical, valid, legitimate scenario to do that. And I'm going to walk you through it. So let's talk about lifting state up and what it means in theory. So lifting state up is the process of moving some shared state to the nearest common ancestor. So suppose you've got like two components, right? Two child components. Both of them have a parent component or an ancestor component, which is shared between those two child components. So you take a look at your child components, right? You identify the shared state between them, and then you decide to move that state up to the nearest common ancestor. This is a very, very common, refactoring technique in other technologies and other, programming paradigms as well. For example, in object-oriented programming, we have the same thing. So we kind of take some, let's say, functionality, some common functionality or a state from the child components, and we move them up. And that, of course, reduces code duplication. It makes the components more reusable. It has all sorts of advantages. So yeah, we're gonna lift state. So you often lift state up when a child component needs to update state, and multiple components need to share the same state. And in our case, the form that we have right now to add components, to add books, needs to add new books to the book list. So we've got like a component, which is a form, allowing us to add books. We have another component, book list, which is going to render those books, right? So yeah, to separate concerns cleanly, we're going to move the form into its own component, and then we're going to pass then the add book, let's say, function as props to the child component. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So first off, we're going to move the form into its own component. So if I take you to my application, right, let me show you what I mean. So right now, as you can see here inside of my app.jsx, right, so we've got this form here, right? This is the form. We have a form, as you can see, right? And then we are rendering the books that we have in our application, right? And I mean, about the books, this is the state that we use to, let's say, store the books, and then we save them into local storage. We fetch them from local storage, and so on. So the first step would be to create a new component called add book form. And add book form is going to be responsible for, let's say, allowing the user to add new books. So basically, we're going to have 3 states for the 3 properties of a book. And then we're going to have, let's say, this event handler to handle the submission of the form. And for the submission of the form, we're going to call the unadd book. And the unadd book is a prop, which this component receives from the parent component, which in this case is app.jsx. And then here we've got the form. So we have 2-way data bindings, right, for inputs, as you can see here, for, let's say, the title, the author, the state of the book. Is it reading, read, to read, and so on. And then we've got a button to submit the form. And as I showed you, when the form is submitted, the function that we've got here, like handle submit, is gonna handle the form submission. It's going to do some simple data validation. It's going to create a new book object based on the values inside of the estate, and then it's going to call a function which has been passed down to this component via the prop by the parent component. So we're kind of taking this form from our app.jsx, and we're going to create a new component to encapsulate this functionality. And this component is called add book form. So let me create this. I'm going to create add book form, add book form.jsx, right? And we're going to write the code for this. So we're going to create the component, which is going to take in the function. And we have to define the states. So author, title, and is read. And then the event handler, handle submit. So let's do some simple data validation. And then let's create the new book object. And what we're going to do after that is to call the function that the parent component has passed to this child component via props. And then let's reset our form fields. So the 3 estates are going to, we're going to reset them. And the last step is to create the template. So the template is going to be a form. It's going to have a couple of inputs, 3 inputs, which are bound to those 3 states, local states inside of this component. So we've got like title, we've got author, and we've got is read. This is the first step towards our refactoring. We are taking one component from app.jsx, and we're going to create a new dedicated component for that piece of functionality. Mark as read, and then let's have a button to submit the form. So this is the first component that we needed to create. Let's continue with the notes. So we created this component. We already talked a little bit about, the things that are happening inside of this component. So basically the idea is that we have some local state for the values inside of the fields, right? And we are receiving a callback function from our parent component, and we're using that to handle the form submission. And after the form has been submitted, we are going to, let's say, reset the states. Now, the next step inside of our app.jsx is to start using this add book form. So here we are importing add book form. We're creating, we already have this state, right? So this array for the books. And then whenever the component mounts, we're gonna fetch the books, the potential books from local storage. And if the books array or book state changes, we're gonna save those books. And then this is the function that we're gonna pass to the child component, to that add book form component. So basically, as you can see, this function is gonna receive a book and is going to update the local state with that new book, right? So we are going to invoke the add book form component, and we're going to pass this function that we just created, and we talked about it, as the prop that the add book form component expects. So whenever the form is submitted inside of this component that we just developed, whenever that form is submitted, this piece of code is going to be invoked. And as you can see, this piece of code is going to receive a new book, which we created inside of the handle submit function of this component. This is the book that we are creating there, and we are passing to this function, which we have received inside of add book form component as a prop. And this piece of code, as I showed you, is going to update the local state inside of app.jsx with this new book. So yeah, so right now the app.jsx, we have taken one responsibility, which was that form. Out of this app.jsx, we have introduced a separate dedicated component for that. This makes the app.jsx focused, right? Right now, the main responsibility of app.jsx is this. And I will, throughout the future episodes, I will take out this listing, feature, and I'm gonna create another book list component for this one as well. But right now, we're gonna leave this as is. And yeah, that's it. So let's go ahead to our application. Let me go to app.jsx. I'm gonna remove this piece of code altogether, and I'm gonna write the new version of app.jsx. So basically, what we are going to do is to import the book card component as well as the add book form component. And let's create the component. So we're going to have a local state for books. We are going to have two use effect hooks for fetching books from local storage and to save books back to local storage when the book's state changes. So this first hook is going to run on first render whenever the component is attached to the DOM. The next one is going to execute whenever the book's state changes. Instead of the dependency array, we're going to say books. And then we are going to create the function that we want to pass down to the child component, which in this case is add book form. And this component is going to receive a book, is going to add it to that state. Now let's return the template. So we're going to have the book body, then we're going to have add book form, we're going to pass the function for the prop, and we're going to go through the book's state to render each book here. And now let's export the component. So I just need to go with book.author here, right? So right now this part of the application, right, is being rendered using the code that we've got here, and then the add book form component is responsible for this portion of the code. And as I showed you, throughout the upcoming episodes, I'm going to take out this piece of code as well from the app.jsx, and I'm going to create a book list component. And then in that case, we will have the add book form and the book list component both sharing a common piece of state within, which in this case is the books array. And that books array is going to reside inside of the common parent or common ancestor of those two separate components, which will be, of course, the app component. But that is the topic of some of the upcoming episodes. So let's talk about the code. So handle book, handle add book is going to update the books array. It is passed down as prop to the add book form. So whenever the add book form submits the form, that add book is going to handle that submission. So add book form is now reusable and focused on a single task, rendering the UI of the form and the logic. And because it can receive the form submission prop, right, the add book form component is now flexible and reusable. Why? Because it can receive the callback function, which is responsible for handling the form submission. That means that you can reuse it as many times as you want, and each time you can specify the callback function responsible for handling the form submission. We have used it once inside the app.jsx, and we have specified the form submission event handler or the callback function. So in this episode, we talked about these. Lifting state up, so it means moving state and logic, right? So for example, the books array and the logic to add one book to the books array to a common parent component to share data between children. So we're going to have another children like book list component, book list and add book form are going to, both of them are going to share this state and the logic. And you're going to see that inside of the, throughout the future episodes. We talked about callback props. So callback props are functions that you can pass from the parent to the child to update the parent state. So inside our application, the parent state is that books array state, and we're going to have that function to pass from the parent component to the child component, add book form. Reusability components, when they receive callback functions as props, they become modular, reusable, flexible. And now you know how to lift state up and keep your components loosely coupled. You know how to refactor logic into smaller reusable components. I mean, in the last episode of this tutorial, I'm gonna show you how you can create multiple components to make your overall architecture more modular, flexible, and component oriented, if you will. And you now know how you can communicate upwards from the child to parent using function props. So using function props, you kind of invoke a function from your child component. That function is defined inside of your parent component, but you're receiving it as prop and you invoke it inside of the child component. So you're kind of communicating something from the child component to the parent component. And that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, stay tuned for the next episode as well.